All right, so this is a continuation of some excerpts from Meditation 3. As we saw in the last video, Descartes uses a priori thinking and reasoning to reason from the meditation to conclusion that I am, I exist counts as an item of knowledge to a new conclusion, which he also apparently thinks of as a new item of knowledge, and that is the rule of clarity and distinctness. Like I said, he wants to use that rule as a bridge principle to see what else he might be able to claim as a category of a belief that would be classifiable in the category of certainty, hence in terms of its truth. So let's go ahead and look at a paragraph that comes just one or two paragraphs later after the one that we just looked at. So he says here, when I was thinking of something very simple and easy in arithmetic or geometry, for example, that 2 plus 3 added together make 5, and things of that sort, was I not recognizing these with sufficient clarity, enough clarity to at least affirm that they were true? Put a triangle over true. In other words, right here, he's asking, can I say that when it comes to certain beliefs that could be classified as those having to do with arithmetic or geometry, he gives you an example here, do I not have the opportunity now, and does the rule of clarity and distinctness not apply here? Okay, or the opportunity to apply, does the rule of clarity and distinctness apply to beliefs that have to do with arithmetic and geometry? He's asking, he's wondering. Later on, to be sure, I did judge that such things could be doubted. So do you remember this word, right? Remember, he's been using skepticism in a methodological way, right? And he thinks he has defeated it to some extent, but he hasn't shown that his I am, I exist, and the rule of clarity and distinctness derived from that first belief, first item of knowledge, shows that he can have knowledge of other things yet. So remember in Meditation 1, he used the evil demon hypothesis to show that it's possible, at least 0.001%, to doubt beliefs that have to do with arithmetic and geometry. So put a triangle over doubt here. But the only reason I did so was that it crossed my mind that some God could have perhaps placed within me a certain kind of nature. Here, when he's using the word certain, he's not using it in the epistemological sense, like can I be certain about these beliefs? Or this is a belief of which I can be absolutely certain is true. No, when he's using the word certain here, he just means a particular kind of nature, a special kind of nature. And by God, he said that some God. He didn't say which God. And in fact, here you can just think of maybe a God whom he might have referred to earlier as an evil demon or an evil genius. So he goes on to say, so that I deceived myself even about those things which appeared most obvious. So obvious, here you want to be thinking about clear and distinct. It's really hard to doubt, 2 plus 3 equals 5. And in fact, as far as he's concerned, anything that could be classified as a belief stemming from or having to do with arithmetic, math, geometry, and the like. And every time this preconceived opinion about the supreme power of God occurs to me, I cannot but confess that if he wished, it would be easy for him to see to it that I go astray. Think about the word astray, right? That you go off the path. Often when we use this word astray, we mean it like in a moral behavioral sense. So we can think of like, if someone in a relationship goes astray, maybe has an affair or cheats on someone. But here he's talking about going epistemologically astray. In other words, thinking that you have true belief when you don't have sufficient proof or justification for it. Especially if you go ahead and affirm and accept as true a belief that you don't have sufficient enough or adequate justification or proof, and hence can't really claim to be certain about a belief. Even in those matters which I think I see as clearly as possible with my mind's eye. So notice again the word clearly, put a triangle over that, right? So clarity and clearly, he's getting to the same point with that. And notice here how he says mind's eye. What he means by that is like, if we go back to the wax example, think of how he said he knew the true that if there was an external object that he thinks is named by wax or a candle, that he understood it best not with his senses but with his what? With his mind, with his mind's eye. In other words, with reason. But whenever I turn my attention to those very things which I think I perceive with great clarity, underline clarity and put a triangle over it, and do not put a triangle over certain over here because he's not using it in an epistemological sense. I am so completely persuaded by them that I spontaneously burst out the following words. Let whoever can deceive me do so. He will never succeed in making me nothing, not while I think I am something, or in making it true someday that I never existed, since it is true that I exist now. Or perhaps even making 2 and 3 when added together more or less than 5 or anything like that, in which I clearly recognized a manifest contradiction. So put a triangle over clearly there as well. And since I have no reason to think that some God exists who is a deceiver, and since up to this point I do not know enough to state whether there is a God at all, it is clear that the reason for any doubt which rests on this opinion alone is very tenuous, and if I may say so, metaphysical. Okay, so I want you to put a bracket around, go to line 182. I have no reason to think that some God exists who is a deceiver. So we're gonna, even though there's statements above the bracketed statement, we're gonna number only the statements that have a logical role to play in terms of an argument. So anything that we're bracketing will either be a premise or conclusion. So here we're gonna say that this is statement 1. The word since typically tells us that a premise is coming, and that's definitely the case here. Then we've got and since, so in other words, we've got another premise indicator. So we're gonna number this 2 and label it a premise. I do not know enough to state whether there is a God at all. So that's going to be a premise. What do you see? What word do you see in this second statement, in the second premise? What word names the fundamental and powerful concept for this unit? I want you to underline it and put a triangle over the word in the second statement as it occurs here in line 183, partially. Put a triangle over the word that names the fundamental and powerful concept here. So then he says he's basically giving you 2 reasons, and then when we use our college level reading skills, which are required for a college level philosophy course, we realize that we've got a conclusion here. So he's setting up 2 premises. He says it is clear that the reason for any doubt, so it is clear is not a conclusion indicator at all, but using what we should have as college level reading skills, whether you're in high school or not, you're supposed to have the skills if you're in this class. This is functioning as a conclusion. So we're going to number this statement 3, and we're going to label it conclusion. The reason for any doubt here, reason is not being used to indicate that he is giving you a premise in support of a conclusion. It's more like giving you reason. When he uses the word reason here, he's saying the explanation for something. So here he's saying, it is clear that the explanation I have for any doubt, which rests of this opinion alone, is very tenuous, and if I may say so, metaphysical. So this is like a 2-statement conclusion technically. Well, actually, no. It's a 1-statement conclusion. So, in other words, he wants to go ahead right here and affirm that, yes, the rule of clarity and distinctness applies to any beliefs that he has about arithmetic and geometry. That is, beliefs that he has when applying the rules of arithmetic, and rules that he has, beliefs that he has when thinking about the ideas within geometry and applying rules of geometry. He thinks that those beliefs, those applications, those ideas are those which his mind or that he can affirm that his mind is at the moment clearly and distinctly perceiving. Hence, he wants to go ahead and say that he does have knowledge when it comes to these areas of belief, these disciplines. But as he's pointing out here, he's saying, I have to be careful because I remember I brought up the evil demon or evil genius hypothesis earlier. And he's saying it seems like that, I do have enough clarity and distinctness for me to say that even if there is an evil demon, I still can apply this rule to say I have these beliefs from geometry and arithmetic that count as knowledge. But that said, he decides that he's going to deal with this leftover problem of this evil demon, hyperbolic, crazy deceiver from Meditation 1. So he goes on to say, so there's an argument right there, okay? Then he says, however, right? However, so he's going to contradict or call something into question that he said earlier, which is going to be this little argument that we looked at, which is more of a kind of a minor argument in terms of what Meditation 3 is all about. So he says, to remove, so we're going to go ahead and restart the numbering for this argument in here. To remove even that doubt, as soon as the occasion presents itself, I ought to examine whether God exists, and if he does, whether he can be a deceiver. Okay, so that's going to be statement 2. And then we've got, for as long as this point remains obscure, it seems to me that I can never be completely certain about anything else. So as it turns out, here the word for is functioning as a premise indicator. But it's kind of doing double duty in a weird way, because it's also being used as a kind of a preposition. But in any case, I want you to know that this is a premise. It's harder to see. This is going to be statement 3 in this argument. And these are two conclusions that are supposed to follow simultaneously. So there's an argument right here, and then there's an argument right here. So what does he decide to do? Well, he decides that he needs to remove any doubt he might have about arithmetics, geometry, mathematical beliefs, and that to do that, he needs to see whether God refers to something real, and if God does refer to something real, the word God, whether he can be a deceiver. And then basically he's saying because, right, he can never be completely certain about anything else till he does that. In other words, what he wants here is for God to validate the rule of clarity and distinctness. Notice here in 188, in the last part of the last statement that we numbered in the second argument, there is a concept that we have put a triangle over before. What word do I want you to put a triangle over in line 188, or in layout in line 188? Please put that triangle there now. So let's add to our notes. So now I want you to add that, so we have, he discovers a rule. Okay, so next, okay, so then RD wants to show God refers to something real. Why? Does he have a spiritual or religious purpose in doing so? No. He doesn't even really have ultimately a metaphysical purpose. The argument has a metaphysical purpose. He's going to try to show you that God refers to something real, but the real objective is epistemological. Okay? And that epistemological purpose is, give me just a second. Oh, wait a minute. Let's go. I've got a different version of the notes here, so let's go right here. Sorry, I'm being a little bit confusing. Give me just a second. I apologize, guys. I really do. I have 3 different sections, and I realized I was pulling from the wrong version, and I like to make sure I stay consistent and use the same version of my lecture for each class. So let's start over. So this is what your notes looked like. Okay, so whatever you have, erase it from this video in terms of your personal notes and add this as well. So here, then, I want you to add that RD decides he must show God refers to something real. Okay. And that he is not a deceiver. All right, so now let's go to our last paragraph in Meditation 3 that we're going to look at. There's so many paragraphs in Meditation 3. There's at least 20 or 30 paragraphs. I'm just highlighting some things. All right, so then he goes on sometime later in the Meditation 3 to say, and so the only thing remains is the idea of God. Okay, so this is a very important point. So he's going to argue for the existence of God based simply on the fact that he has an idea of God. Okay, so in your notes, hold on. Okay, draw a triangle like this. Okay, write the word God, and then think about different characteristics or attributes that God might have. He's going to try to show that the word God has a referent, that God is real, God exists, but he's only going to focus on the fact that he has an idea of God. And he's going to think about the characteristics, the attributes, the qualities, the definition that you might say that he has in his own mind. He is going to ignore for the time being whether or not there is a God. He's going to first focus on the fact that he has an idea of God in his mind and that his idea of God is such that God has certain attributes. So he's not going to try to argue for God's existence, for example, by intelligent design. There's an argument for God's existence which says, hey man, look at nature. Look at how well nature works together. It works together so well that there's obviously an intelligence to nature. And the intelligent design of nature implies an intelligent designer. That intelligent designer must be God, therefore God exists. Descartes cannot use an argument like this to prove that God exists because that would mean that you're appealing to your physical senses, and he has not rescued the physical senses from the fires of skepticism yet as a route and ultimate source to knowledge, or as any kind of route or means to knowledge. He cannot use religion because religion is based on the testimony of others, whether it's through holy text or what other people tell you to believe, whether there is a God or not a God, or what to believe about God or what not. That also relies on the senses. He needs to rely only on using his mind. Therefore, he's just going to focus on the fact that he has the idea of God and what his idea of God is exactly in detail. In this sense, this means that what Descartes would say is that his idea of God has objective reality in terms of it being an object, an actual idea that's within his mind. So even though it is subjectively within him as a particular individual, it is true that even though it is subjectively within him, it still exists as an object in his mind. It's a fact that it's in his mind, therefore it has objective reality. All right, so he starts from the fact that he has the idea of God in his mind. He says, and so that's what we're going to start right now. And so the only thing remaining is the idea of God. Don't worry too much about the word so there. Just know that he's saying that there is the idea of God. So we're going to modify this a little bit to say, I have an idea of God. Okay, and notice that he says remaining because between this paragraph and this paragraph, he goes through possible explanations as to why he has any beliefs or any thoughts or any ideas about a God and God existing. So he rules out all other explanations as to why he even has an idea of God and whether or not that shows that God exists. And he returns to the fact that he has the idea of God in his mind. He says, I must consider whether there is anything in this idea for which I myself could not have been the origin. He says, by the name God, so we're going to do this one, that's going to be a premise. This is going to be two, a premise. By the name God, I understand a certain infinite, eternal, immutable, independent, supremely intelligent, and supremely powerful substance by which I myself was created, along with everything else, if in fact anything else does exist. So that's statement two. That's also a premise. Right here, when he's using the word certain, we're not putting a triangle over it because he's not using it in the epistemological sense. He's just saying a particular being. Notice all these descriptors that are used to describe God. That goes with this triangle part right here. See, all these descriptors like independent, supremely intelligent, supremely powerful, that would go right here in the concept triangle for his idea of God, right here. All of these properties, so that's statement 3, are so clearly, oh, do you see that word? Put a triangle over it. All of these properties, so all these attributes which his idea has with respect to God, all of these properties are clearly so great that the more diligently I focus on them, the less it seems I could have brought them into being myself alone. Okay, so then he goes on to say, so that's going to be another premise. Then he goes on to say, and thus, look at that, a major conclusion indicator. From what I have said earlier, in other words, it follows. This is another conclusion indicator. I logically, statement 4, have to conclude another conclusion indicator that God necessarily exists. Now, I could just have the opening bracket here, but I wanted to stress the word logically, put a triangle over logically. Because what he's trying to say is like, look, I've gone from an idea of God in my mind, just thinking about the word God and all the qualities or other ideas that are associated with the word God. In other words, just using my mind, inspecting the idea I have of God, and following that inspection of these ideas associated with God and how they could come to be there, I am able to use just my mind to draw this conclusion with pure logic, with reasoning, that God necessarily exists. Okay, so I do want you to see this. I want you to see how this is an a priori argument for God using reason alone. Now, don't worry. There's a lot I could say about how this argument works, and in your reading, Lawhead gets into it a little bit more, but I don't want to take too much time out of what is an epistemological concern in this video to get into the metaphysical details of this argument. What I do want to do is have you add some details to these notes right here. So, of course, he believes that he has argued for God's existence. He goes on to argue that he is not a deceiver. So, we're going to now write here, after arguing a priori, you can say by a priori means for God's existence and later on that he is not a deceiver, he claims that his rule of clarity and distinctness has been validated. Okay, so we're going to say that this is significance. Okay. So, at this point then, he believes he is justified. I'm not saying I agree, but Descartes thinks he is justified in claiming he has rescued an entire category of belief from skepticism. And so if you go back and you look at the first paragraph that we looked at in this video, the category of belief is that of which has to do with reason. Okay, reason. And so that includes any beliefs that comes from mathematics, math, what he calls arithmetic, geometry. We could include calculus. Of course, these are all going under math, trigonometry, trig, but also logic. Okay, but reason is a source, a route to knowledge, justified true belief that he thinks he has rescued as a means to knowledge. And hence, any beliefs that are clearly and distinctly perceived by reason can now be counted as knowledge. So this is very important right here, significance.